Hopefully that was clear. All right, and then the last part of this first bit is section 2.b, section 2b. This is section 2b. Section 2b is titled "The Common Principle of All Analytic Judgments is that of contradiction." It's a mouthful. 2b, the common principle of all analytic judgments, right? All judgments which are explicative, is that of contradiction. All right. So for Kant, a priori judgments depend. It's inextricably bound to the principle of contradiction. Some people call it the principle of non-contradiction, some people call it the principle of contradiction. Kant calls it the principle of contradiction, right? So we'll stick with what he says. A priori judgments depend on the principle of contradiction. I've formalized it three ways because depending on who you're reading, they're going to formalize it in different sense. It basically all means the same thing. You have the modal operator possible, right? So it is not possible that there exists an x, or for some x, right? This is sort of the complicated way of writing it. X is an f, and x is not an f, right? It is impossible, it is not possible, it is impossible that there exists at least one x, such that that x is an f and that x is not an f, right? You can't have that. That's sort of like the most formal way of writing it up. Then you have another way of writing it out, right, which is like this. It is not the case, it cannot be the case, it is not the case that A can both be A and not A. And the simplest way of writing it, sort of the shorthand way, is this, right? So they all basically mean the same thing. Depending on who you're reading, they might present it differently. I don't like people getting confused, but they all mean the same thing, right? If you say that it's impossible that there is at least one x, such that that x is an f, and it's not an f, given the same time, given the same period, same space, blah, 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 blah. It's the same as saying it is not the case, right? It cannot be the case that you have an A and not an A, or just A and not an A. It's all the same stuff, right? How does this apply specifically to our discussion, his discussion on analytic claims, right? We'll look at the analytic claim that we had before, right, with respect to bachelors. I'll give you two versions, right? Version 1 and version 2. Bachelor is an unmarried man, and then the next one will be a bachelor is right, we'll put it like that. A bachelor is, well, I don't want to use the double negation. Well, yeah, I'll use the double. A bachelor is not an, this is the affirmation of married man. M-A-R, man. Okay. So, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Bachelor, subject. An unmarried man, not an unmarried man, right? We know that this is false, right? We know that this is false, right? A bachelor is not an unmarried man. Not unmarried means to be married, right? Two negations is an affirmation. So a bachelor is not an unmarried man is to say that a bachelor is a married man. So I could have equally written a bachelor is a married. Right, so these two are synonymous, right? Alright, so we know that these two claims here are false. We know that this is true. A bachelor is an unmarried man is true. Why is it true, though? Remember, for Kant, specifically, the truth of this proposition is not contingent on me identifying any particular bachelor. It's contingent on just the truth of this proposition, right? A bachelor is an unmarried man. Why is that true? Because it's true by definition. Part of being a bachelor, by definition, is being single, is being unmarried. Now we can explain a little bit more how all of this factors into it. There is no new content that is given to the subject from the predicate, and this is why it's expletive, E-X-P-L-I-C-A-T. Right? This is why it's an explanation. Right? There's no new information. Right? if I say a bachelor, right, and we recognize that entailed within the concept bachelor is the idea of being unmarried, right? If within the concept of bachelor is the concept which is inextricable, right? It cannot be pulled or removed, right? It's inextricably bound. The idea of being unmarried is inextricably bound with the concept of bachelor. Then I cannot say that a bachelor or an unmarried man is not an unmarried man, right? If I say an unmarried man is not an unmarried man, I've done this, right? I've done this. I've created a contradiction. So for Kant, what's very important to recognize, since the predicate, and I'll just read what I have, since the predicate, right, since the predicate of an a priori judgment is explicative and not ampliative, the predicate cannot contain any new information, or specifically any contradictory information, not already included within the subject, right? It cannot be the case that I have a claim here, and that claim is, we'll just say A, and A equals, and you'll see it, right? If we say A equals being unmarried, right, being a bachelor, right? You cannot say A here, being unmarried, being a bachelor, and then in the same sentence, right, being unmarried, being a bachelor, being unmarried, being a bachelor, and then say that you're not married, right? Because then that's not A. Being married. Right? You cannot make both claims, right? So within this proposition, you cannot make the claim that a bachelor is not an unmarried man, right? That's false. Why is it false? Because the predicate is denying, in a sense, the subject for which it belongs, right? It's sort of like a possession sense, right? The subject possesses this thing. So it would be illogical to talk about being a bachelor as a subject, and then in my description of what that thing is, to deny the very definition of what that thing is, right? By default, this is illogical, and it's on this basis that Kant grounds his both his well, primarily I would argue his epistemology, right? I would say it's his, and actually I'm going to leave it at that. It'll be open for debate whether or not he grounds his metaphysics in this, but he definitely grounds his epistemology in this claim. My ability to understand things, my ability to recognize and interpret, and my cognitive abilities are themselves grounded in a recognition that for these propositions, I recognize immediately that the law of contradiction holds, right? Especially when we're talking about, and I erased it, but when we're talking about explicative or analytic judgments, right? And then the last thing is that there isn't a need to, in this example, there is no need to specify any particular bachelor. We don't have to instantiate the claim, right? We can just talk about the claim in its general sense, right? In the sense in which we're talking about the term or the concept. So this is the first 2 pages of the Prolegomena. He's given a lot. He's packed a lot of information into 2 pages. A lot of information into 2 pages, and there's more that I could have explained. I don't want it to be intimidating. Kant is he's a pretty serious philosopher, and his work can get very, very dense. But all that he's saying at this point is that we can make sense of our world. We can talk about synthetic claims. We can talk about analytic claims. If we're talking about analytic claims, these analytic claims are explicative. All they do is explain, and the predicates that we introduce or use are just are not adding content information. It's just explaining what the subject is. When we talk about synthetic claims, the predicates of those synthetic claims do offer more information that's not included within the subject, and the way that we find and locate the truth of that information is in the world, so that our synthetic claims drive us into experience, our analytic claims drive us into the rigors of our logic, right? And that's very, very important. The synthetic claims are going to lead us into the world. The analytic claims are going to lead us into logic, right? Leading us into logic, we recognize that this holds with the first thing that he said, that the truth of this will not be found in the external world. Logic is not found in the external world, right? It will not be found within my emotional sort of being. It's not a psychological state of affairs. It's the logic, and that's what he's going to analyze as we go through. And, we'll see how the logic fleshes out and how he makes sense of this. So with that being said, this concludes my opening discussion on Kant's Prolegomena to any future metaphysics. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch the video. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Goodbye.